Welcome to episode 109 of Gods and Heroes of Ancient Greece. My name is MyLinda, Butterworth, and today we continue with the tales of Troy and the story of the death of Ajax the Great. So ended the funeral games in the honor of godlike Achilles. Odysseus was the only one of all the princes of the Argive host who had not taken part in them, for as he was fending off the Trojans from the body of Achilles, Alcon had dealt him a painful wound from which he had not yet recovered. And now Thetis offered as a prize the armor and weapons of her son, his glittering shield on which Hephaestus had worked graceful pictures, and the heavy helmet carved with the image of Zeus standing on the vault of heaven, battling with the Titans. Also the curved cuirass, which had clasped the breast of the son of Peleus, dark and impenetrable, and the massive greaves which he had worn as though they were light as feathers. Close by lay his indomitable sword in its silver scabbard, with a golden knob and a handle of ivory. Beside it was the weighty spear, as long as a felled pine, and still red with Hector's blood. Behind the weapons stood Thetis, her head covered with a dark veil. Sadly, she said to the Danai, "All the prizes offered at the funeral games in honor of my son have been won. Now let the best among the Argives, he who saved the corpse, come forward, for to him I shall give the splendid weapons of Achilles." All of them were gifts from the gods, and the immortals themselves delighted in them. It was then that two heroes at once laid claim to the arms: Odysseus, son of Laertes, and Ajax the Great, son of Telamon. Radiant as the evening star, Ajax drew the weapons to him and called on Idomeneus, Nestor, and Agamemnon to testify to his valiant defense. But Odysseus called on the same three, for they were the most wise and just in the entire host. Nestor took the other two aside and said to him in troubled voices, "It is most unfortunate for us that the two best warriors we have are vying for the weapons of slain Achilles. Whichever of them is denied will be offended and withdraw from the fight, which all of us will suffer the consequences of their anger. So do as I say, for I am old and experienced. We have here in our camp a number of Trojans who were captured only recently. Let them decide the quarrel between Ajax and Odysseus, for they have no preference, and they are not biased in favor of either of the heroes." The others agreed and set up as judges the noblest of the Trojans, even though they were prisoners of war. Ajax was the first to appear before them. "What demon has blinded you, Odysseus," he cried, "that you dare to contend with me? You are as much inferior to me as the dog to the lion. Have you forgotten how reluctant you were to leave your home in Ithaca? And you were the one who persuaded us to leave behind in Lemnos Philotetes, son of Poesis, in his sickness and misery. It is you who are guilty of the death of Polymathus, who was stronger and wiser than you. And now you are willing to forgive all the services I performed for the Argives, to forget that I saved your life when all the rest had abandoned you, and you were alone on the field and looked about you in vain for an opportunity to flee? When the fight for Achilles' body started, was I not the one who carried off the corpse together with the armor? You would have never had the strength to carry the weapons, let alone the hero himself. That is why you should yield to me. In any case, I am stronger than you, of a nobler family, and related to the hero for whose arms we are competing." So spoke Ajax, and his excitement grew as he talked. But Odysseus replied with a mocking smile, "Why waste so many words, Ajax? You call me weak and cowardly, and forget that only wisdom is true strength. It is wisdom that teaches the sailor to ride through a stormy sea, that tames wild beasts, panthers, and lions, and compels oxen to serve man. And that is why both in times of need and in council, a man of sense is worth more than a foolish giant who has nothing but bodily strength. That is why Diomedes chose me when he wanted a companion for his expedition to the camp of Races. He did it because I am more crafty and resourceful than anyone else. It was due to my wisdom that the son of Peleus was won for the fight against the Trojans. And even if the Danai require a new hero for their host, believe me, Ajax, that neither your clumsy size nor the wit of another will secure him. He will come because of my smooth, persuasive words. But in addition to my wisdom, the gods also lent me sturdy limbs, and it is not true that I was fleeing when you saved me from the enemy. I was facing them boldly and killing those who attacked, while you stood apart, intent on your own safety. In this way, they quarreled for a long time. But finally, the Trojans who had been set up as judges were impressed with the reasoning of Odysseus and unanimously awarded him the magnificent arms of the son of Peleus. When Ajax heard the verdict, the blood boiled in his veins, his brain throbbed with anger, and he trembled in every fiber. For a long time, he stood motionless and fixed his eyes on the ground. At last his friends succeeded in taking him back to the ships. He walked slowly, and every step expressed stubborn reluctance. In the meantime, dark night rose out of the sea. Ajax sat in his house. He would not touch his food. He would not sleep. Finally, he girt on his armor and gripped his double-edged sword, considering whether to cut Odysseus to pieces, burn the ships, or rage among all the Argives together. And he surely would have done one of these three things had not Athene, who was concerned for Odysseus, her friend, and hostile to mighty Ajax, sent madness on him as he brooded on the harm he would do. Anguish pricked his heart, and he rushed from his house and among the flocks of sheep, which, because he was blinded by the goddess, he took for Argive battalions. The shepherds saw him coming and hid in the bushes on the shores of Xanthus, and he slaughtered the sheep right and left. With his spear he killed 2 great rams, one after another, and taunted them. "Writhe in the dust, you dogs! Lie as the prey of birds! Never again will you 2 sons of Atreus confirm an unjust decision. And you," he continued, "you who are lurking there in the corner and hiding your head because you have a bad conscience. Now the arms of Achilles, which you stole from me, and which you vaunt will avail you nothing. For what good is the armor of a hero when a coward wears it?" And with that, he seized another huge wether, dragged him away to his house, bound him to a doorpost, and took a goad and began to beat the creature with all his might. At this moment, Athene approached him from behind, touched his head, and bade the madness leave him. Unhappy Ajax found himself, goad in hand, staring at the wether, its back torn to shreds. The goad fell from his fingers. His strength left him, and he sank to the ground, divining that he was the victim of a god's anger. Boundless sorrow filled his spirit. When he rose from the dust, he was overcome with such hopeless despair that he could not move his feet, neither forward nor backward, but stood motionless as a tower on the peak of a mountain. Finally, he heaved a deep sigh and said, "Alas, why do the immortals hate me? Why have they humiliated me for the love of crafty Odysseus? Here I stand, a man who has never returned from a fight dishonored. Here I stand, soiled with the blood of guiltless sheep, an object of ridicule, a target for the taunts of my foes. While he was lamenting his disgrace, Tecmessa, the daughter of the king of Phrygia, whom Ajax had taken from her country as spoils of war, and whom he honored and loved as if she were his wife, had been looking for him all over the camp by the ships. Her little son, Ulysses, clung in her arms. She had seen that her master was brooding and sad, but she did not know the reason, for he refused to answer when she questioned him. Soon after he left, she was troubled with dark forebodings, and she followed him and saw the sheep scattered dead over the field. She hurried back to the house, and there found Ajax ashamed and desperate, calling now for Teucer, his half-brother, now for his child Ulysses, and praying for a death befitting a noble hero. Tecmessa approached him in tears, clasped his knees, and implored him not to leave her alone, a captive among enemies. She reminded him of his old father and mother and Salamis, and held out the child to him, picturing his lot if he were forced to grow up without his father, governed by harsh taskmasters. Impulsively, Ajax stretched out his arms to his son and took him and caressed him, saying, "Child, surpass your father in happiness, but resemble him in all else. Then everything will be well with you. My half-brother Teucer will rear you and cherish you, but now my shield-bearers shall take you to my parents, Telamon and Erebor in Salamis, so that you may delight the last years of their life until they too descend to Hades." With that he handed the boy over to his servants and commended Tecmessa to his half-brother. Then he tore himself from her embrace, drew the sword which Hector, his foe, had once given him, and fixed it firmly in the ground. Finally he raised his hands to heaven and prayed, "It is a little thing I ask of you, Father Zeus. When I am dead, send my brother Teucer quickly. Do not let my foes reach me before him and throw my body to the dogs and birds of prey. And I call on you, Furies, as you see me here, the slayer of myself. So let those others fall, done to death by their dearest kin. Come, show no mercy, satisfy your hunger. But you, O sun god, shining through the heights of the sky, when your chariot circles over Salamis, my native land, slow your journey, and bring my old father and my poor mother news of my bitter fate. Farewell, sweet light. Farewell, Salamis. Farewell, Athens, the home of my ancestors, with your rivers and springs. And farewell, region of Troy, where I have lived so many years. And now, come, death, and may your eyes hold pity for me." With these words, he ran on his sword and fell as if struck by lightning. When the Danai heard of his death, they came in throngs, threw themselves on the ground, lamented, and strewed dust over their heads. Teucer, whom Telamon had forbidden to return from Troy without Ajax, wanted to kill himself, and would have done so had not his friends taken his sword from him. So he only threw himself over the corpse, and wept with more abandon than a fatherless child on the day which has taken his mother from him. But with a great effort he composed his soul, and turned to Tecmessa, who sat beside Ajax in numb despair, holding to her breast the child the servant had put back in her arms. He promised to protect her and care for the boy like a father, even though he could not accompany them to Salamis for fear of Telamon's anger. Then he prepared to bury the body of his beloved half-brother. But Menelaus, son of Atreus, interfered. "Do not dare bury this man," he said, "who has proved worse than our enemies, the Trojans. By his wicked plan to do murder, he has forfeited honorable burial." Agamemnon, who had just joined them, sided with his brother, and in the course of their heated discussion called Teucer the son of a slave. It was in vain that Teucer reminded them of all the benefits the Argives owed to Ajax, of how he had saved the host when the firebrands flung by the Trojans was setting the ships aflame, and Hector leaped to the decks. "And why do you call me a slave?" he cried. My father Telamon is one of the most glorious heroes of Greece, and my mother's father was King Laomedon. I am descended from the noblest parents and have nothing to be ashamed of. If you would dishonor this fallen hero, you will also disgrace his wife, his son, and his brother. Would such a deed win you fame among men and blessings from the gods? In the midst of this quarrel came crafty Odysseus, turning to Agamemnon and asked, "May a loyal friend tell you the truth without bringing ill will on himself?" "Say what you will," Agamemnon replied, looking at him in surprise. "I do indeed regard you as my best friend in all the Argive host." "Then listen," said Odysseus. "By all the gods, I beg you not leave this man unburied. Do not let your power blind you so that you hate unjustly. If you dishonor a hero such as this, you will not degrade him, but make mock of the law and the will of the gods." The sons of Atreus listened, and for a long time they were speechless. At last Agamemnon cried, "Are you, Odysseus, willing to quarrel with me for the sake of Ajax? Have you forgotten that he was your deadly enemy?" "He was my enemy," Odysseus replied. "I hated him while he was alive. Now that he is dead, I can no longer cherish bitterness against him. We must mourn the loss of so noble a man. I myself am ready to help his brother fulfill the sacred duty of burying him." When Teucer, who had turned away at the coming of Odysseus, heard these words, he went up to him and held out his hand. "You, his grimmest enemy," he exclaimed, "are the only defender of the dead. And still I do not dare let you touch the corpse for the spirit of Ajax, which left in his body while you and he were unreconciled, might resent your touch. But in all other things you shall be my helper, for there is enough to be done." And he pointed to Tecmessa, who was still mute with grief. Odysseus spoke to her kindly. "You shall not be the slave of another," he said. "As long as Teucer and I live, you and your child shall be safe and cared for, as though Ajax himself were at your side." The sons of Atreus did not venture to object to the fair decision of Odysseus. He took the combined strength of many warriors to lift the great body of Ajax. They carried him to the ships, cleansed him of blood and dust, and burned him on a pyre as stately as that of Achilles, who by his death had caused the loss of a second Argive hero whom no one could replace. And here is where I end my tales for today. But I'll be back with more tales, many more tales. Until then, my friends, enjoy the journey.